Syria's transitional president Ahmed al-Sharaa was never going to have an easy job. In fact, overthrowing the regime of Bashar al-Assad last December may actually prove to be the easiest part of the process. Sharaa had taken the capital Damascus and had been named the country's new leader. However, Syria was far from united, and large swathes of the country still fell outside the control of the new government. The numerous challenges facing the government spanned all of Syria. To name just three, there was the Kurdish-controlled territory in the northeast and the question of its future. Down in the south, there were continued protests in Suwaida, where the largely Druze population were voicing concern over minority rights and inclusivity. And in western Syria, on the Mediterranean coast, where the Alawite minority are concentrated, there were pockets of resistance by those loyal to the ousted Assad regime and opposed to the new government. In just the past week or so, there have been significant developments on all three fronts, with both good and bad news for the Syrian government, which we're going to explain in this video. Explore which world leaders are winning and which are losing every week with our new podcast, the World Leader Leaderboard. Find it over on the TLDR Podcast YouTube channel or in your favourite podcast app. We'll start in Syria's coastal region, the heartland of the Alawite minority, which the Assad family is a part of and from whom the former regime drew heavily for its army and security apparatus. On Thursday, March the 6th, fighters loyal to the former regime ambushed state security forces in Jabla. Pro-government reinforcements were subsequently sent into the region to suppress the nascent Assadist rebellion. Government forces carried out combing operations to root out rebel fighters, and clashes continued over the following days. Reports suggest that thousands of government forces, as well as pro-government fighters effectively operating outside of government control, made their way to the coastal region, and the violence spiraled into sectarian bloodshed, with at least hundreds of Alawite civilians killed in apparent reprisal attacks and atrocities that have been condemned by the international community. On March the 10th, the Syrian government announced an end to the operation and said it had neutralized the security cells and remnants of the former regime. President Sharaa ordered an independent investigation into the killings and vowed to punish anyone responsible, even if they are government allies. So what's the consequence of the violence? Firstly, it obviously had a horrific human cost and may well inflame sectarian tensions and continue a cycle of violence. Secondly, while it may not pose an existential threat to the new government, it does demonstrate that among its many challenges, the government faces an armed opposition movement. And finally, it damages the government's credibility as a moderate unifying force and shows that it does not wield full authority over even its own nominal supporters. And the atrocities of the past week could derail or delay efforts to lift suffocating international sanctions on Syria. So now let's move to northeastern Syria, where the key player is the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF. Through the Syrian civil war, the SDF was able to establish a de facto state in the territory it controlled in Syria's north and east. The SDF was a key ally of the United States in the fight against the so-called Islamic State group, and there are in fact between 900 and 2,000 US troops still on the ground in Syria as part of this mission. Following the fall of Assad, there were a lot of questions about what the future of this SDF-led de facto state would be. For example, would it continue its fight for autonomy by battling the new government, or would it be subsumed into a new and united Syrian state? Talks between the central government and the SDF soon began, and eventually, on Monday the 10th of March, a deal was signed by President Ahmed al-Sharaa and SDF commander Mazloum Abdi that saw the SDF agree to fully integrate its civil and military institutions, including border gates, airports, and oil and gas fields, into the new Syrian state by the end of the year. Among other things, the agreement also stated that the Kurdish community is an essential part of the Syrian state, and the state will guarantee their citizenship and all constitutional rights, that the rights of all Syrians to be represented and participate in the political process and state institutions will be guaranteed, that there would be a complete cessation of hostilities, and that the SDF would support the Syrian state in the fight against terrorism and all threats that threaten the security and unity of the country. It's safe to say this is a major development, and a step towards the stabilization and national unity that Sharaa, and indeed many Syrians, have been seeking. So why now? Well, for the Kurdish-led forces in the region, they may have seen their negotiating position as eroding, particularly as uncertainty mounts over the future of American support for the SDF and the US military presence in the country. Similarly, the SDF will be hoping that the agreement will de-escalate the group's long-running conflict with Turkey and Turkish-backed forces in the region, especially as the new Syrian government has strong ties with Turkey. The agreement, while obviously a significant moment in and of itself, is only one step in a process, and there remain some unanswered questions. For example, exactly how the SDF-controlled institutions will be integrated is unclear. The government will be glad to have things like airports and lucrative oil fields come under its control, but it will also face the considerable task of controlling prisons containing thousands of suspected IS fighters. Nevertheless, news of the agreement sparked celebrations in the Syrian capital Damascus and in cities in the Kurdish-controlled northeast. The SDF itself said the agreement lays the foundation for a modern republic that aligns with the aspirations of the Syrian people. And finally, we'll move down south to where Druze minority militias in Suwaida province, which despite keeping up contact with the new government, have retained autonomy and been so far reluctant to lay down their arms. Intercommunal tensions have at times flared up. Earlier this month, in a Druze-populated suburb of Damascus, unrest broke out after unknown gunmen killed a member of the government's security forces. As has long been the case in Syria, outside powers are wielding influence here too. Since Assad's fall, Israel has invaded and occupied pockets of Syrian territory inside and beyond the Golan Heights buffer zone. The Israeli government has framed its intervention as not just for its own security, but also as a way to protect Syria's Druze population, though, as we explained in a recent video, there are reasons to be skeptical of this pretext. However, on Tuesday, reports emerged that an agreement had been, or was at least close to being, reached between the Syrian government and Druze leaders in Suwaida to integrate it into the Syrian state, which would be another significant boost for the government following its deal with the SDF. So, all in all, the last week has brought major developments to Syria, and the country has made progress towards national unity. But it is a difficult and ongoing process, and the sectarian violence that erupted last week highlights the scale of the challenge ahead. Like a lot of things, this whole situation is very much in a state of flux. With Trump breaking international alliances and fundamentally changing geopolitics, the world has certainly felt more unstable. Every day, we're faced with weird headlines, from Trump's trade war with Canada and Mexico to Elon Musk's not quite so efficient Department of Government Efficiency, or Trump declaring war on Mars to try and regain some international allies. Okay, that last one might not be real, but we do dive deep into the chaotic world of US politics in our series WTF USA. This is our series where we explain everything that's happened in the land of the free. With Trump behind the resolute desk, the number of WTF moments only looks likely to increase. Unlike some of our other serious videos, the tone of WTF USA is more lighthearted and takes something of an irreverent look at what's going on. If you're interested, WTF USA can be found exclusively on Nebula. Nebula is also home to other uplifting content, including the new series Abolish Everything. This comedy panel show sees comedian abolitionists roast a pet peeve they want banned from society, while a panel of improvisers, dubbed the political establishment, argue on behalf of the status quo. It's a lot of fun and genuinely a hilarious new show from the Wendover team. So if you didn't know, Nebula is an independent, creator-owned streaming platform that specializes in thoughtful content, from creators like Wendover Productions, Neo, and Real Life Law. It's not just WTF USA either. You can also watch every normal TLDR video on Nebula ad-free, and in some cases before they even land on YouTube. If you're not a member already, click the link in the description to get 40% off. We really hope you check out the series, and as always, thank you for your support.